All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and we have our extended live coverage of the United Healthcare CEO shooting from New York last week. Why? Because the suspect is in custody, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. And as we've been reporting about earlier today, he appeared in a Pennsylvania courtroom because that's where he was arrested. He was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, hit with firearms charges, but really they're more placeholder charges so that the government can actually get him transported, extradited back to New York, where he now faces murder charges and other weapons possession charges. Maybe if I have time, I'll read the actual arrest warrant a little bit later on live on the air. But the question now becomes what happens, because he appears to be fighting extradition. His bail has been denied. So there's some little legal issues that are up in the air. Also, could he be charged federally with a crime? We're going to talk about that as well as we all try to sort out what exactly is going on here. You know, you look at his past, a guy who seemingly had everything. He came from a great family. He was highly intelligent, Ivy League trained and educated, and now out of nowhere seemed to murder the CEO of one of the largest health insurance companies in the country. It's a very bizarre situation. On top of the fact, as Sierra Gillespie was reporting before, because she's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, we plan to get her back up later, it seems that he was railing against, I don't know what he was saying, but as he was led into that courtroom earlier today, he had an outburst. He said something to the media about this is an injustice. And then in the courtroom, he apparently, as Sierra said, he tried to say something, but was silenced by his lawyer. So a very bizarre situation that's happening with this suspect. I want to talk a little bit more about it. We're also going to take your questions. So if you have questions right now, submit them on YouTube. We'll answer them here on the air. But I want to bring on Serena Townsend, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, who's with me in studio, as well as Professor Kirk Burkhalter, former NYPD detective first grade. And also, I think we are joined right now by Tom Maronick, who's Jr., who knows the Mangione family. He's a criminal defense attorney. So thank you so much for all of you for coming on. Professor, I'll start with you first. We have a question from one of our YouTubers that I think is really interesting. This is from Helen, the Scottish Llama. Could there be a case for charging in the federal courts?
I believe the way to get to the federal courts with regards to charges here would be with regards to the weapon. Primarily, possession of a silencer is a federal crime. Now, the media has certainly been referring to the piece that was connected to the gun as a silencer. At this point, we really don't know, because a flash suppressor, which is meant to muzzle the actual visible flash of a gun to a certain extent, does look like a silencer. So there would need to be some testing done to confirm that the device actually lowered the decibel that a gun, the amount of noise the gun makes to a certain amount. So in short, it's possible. This has been at issue certainly with federal legislation back and forth about ghost guns, but I don't think we're there yet where that would qualify as a federal crime. So I think those are the two ways that you may get there.
But the possession of that ghost gun is what actually led to these Pennsylvania charges. You're basically dealing with a gun that you potentially made on your own. You 3D printed it. It doesn't have a serial number. It's not registered. So I want to actually now move to Serena, and then Tom, I'm going to come to you. Serena, we have a question from Nikola Maslova, and this is really interesting. What happens if he fights the extradition? It appears that he is fighting the extradition. And my understanding is, based on the reporting that we've seen from the courtroom, is the defense has now 14 days to apply for habeas corpus and contest the extradition. What does that mean? What should we be looking out for?
Well, they're going to try to prevent him from moving to New York to face these much stricter charges. He'd rather stay in Pennsylvania and just fight a weapons charge than come to New York and face murder in the second degree and other charges. And so the defense is going to fight that. They're going to say anything that they can to try to prevent him from being moved over there, whether New York just doesn't have enough evidence to bring him over. Sometimes you get a situation where the states fight they don't want to extradite, or they want to keep that person in their own county to prosecute that person first. Here, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Pennsylvania is more than happy to cooperate with New York. The defense is going to fight it, but I think his chances are very low. I think he is going to get extradited to New York.
The Blair County District Attorney Peter Weeks said, "We do not intend to delay this defendant's extradition to New York, and we've indicated to New York their prosecution should take precedence, and then ours will follow." While I guess also if he's convicted of second-degree murder, I'm not sure they would keep those charges in Pennsylvania, but we'll see. All right, Tom, I want to bring you in. Thank you so much for joining us. I can imagine this is not easy for you. This is not easy for the Mangione family, but my understanding is you know them. I want a better understanding as we try to make sense of, if this is true, why this young man would do this. Talk to us about who the Mangione family is and anything you can tell us about Luigi Mangione. I understand that you didn't know him personally, but any insight you can give us would be really helpful.
So the Mangione family, I got to know through a radio show that I've been part of for 20 years, from 2003 to 2023 when I retired the show. They own WCBM, which is a conservative radio station in Baltimore, and it broadcasts a lot of places, but has some major names on the station. I have hosted a law and politics show where we don't always toe the party line. We have guests on, or we had during our career, guests on who would frequently go far outside of the scope of what they would typically have on the station. And I was worried about whether they would kind of censor that or tell me not to do something, but in fact, that was never the case. They were very supportive and very nurturing for me as a radio host. And when I became a lawyer and ventured into law quite a bit, they didn't let me stray, or they didn't tell me to stray from hard-hitting legal topics. So I've had a great relationship with them insofar as the radio show. The family has a lot of clout. They're greatly esteemed in Baltimore County. So this is the sort of wealthy suburb, at least a lot of parts of it, of Baltimore City. A lot of people live there. It's very diverse insofar as the county. There's a big difference between the people who live in Catonsville, Towson, other parts of the county. But the Mangione name would go a lot of places. They'd help out charity. They'd support a lot of different interests. They own 2 golf courses, one Turf Valley, which is one of the best, certainly in the state, perhaps even regionally, and then also the radio station and other real estate. But just a well-regarded, well-heeled, successful family, if that makes sense.
And did you ever hear about Luigi? Did you know anything about Luigi? Have you ever met Luigi? I mean, this is, again, I did a whole separate sidebar, the show that I host on this, and we broke everything we know about the Luigi and his family. This is a guy, Ivy League educated, highly intelligent. You know, he was a wrestler. He was interested in robotics, computer science. He got a master's and bachelor's degree, had a great job lined up. Some of this doesn't, I mean, a lot of this doesn't make sense, but is there any information you can shed about what we know about Luigi?
I never met Luigi. I knew his grandfather and his uncle and his cousin, Nino Mangione, the delegate. So I never got to know him, but I am surprised, shocked, because this is the furthest thing from what you would think when you think of the family.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're right, he had every opportunity. He was the valedictorian at Gilman, which is an elite prep school. I went to what I think is the best local high school, but they would say the same about their school. And he went off to an Ivy League school, University of Pennsylvania, and really didn't have to worry about his means being taken care of. The family would do that. They were generous within their family, just like they were in the community. And it just doesn't make sense on so many levels.
Have you spoken to them? Have you reached out to them?
I have not. My knowledge of them and interactions with them were through the radio show. So I would see them at events related to the radio show and just sort of checking in on how I was doing with the show. But I've not spoken with them about this at all.
Tom, stand by. We're going to get more perspective on that in a minute. I want to get to more of your questions. So we have a question here that I think is, I don't have the answer for it. Kirk, hopefully you have the answer for it. It's a question from Michael Bahari. Do we have answers about the Monopoly money and Tommy Hilfiger jacket? That's what was found in the backpack that was located in Central Park that was presumably left by the shooter. Are the significance of these items understood? I can't make heads or tails of this. I don't know what to make of it. What do you take away from it?
No, we absolutely do not have answers beyond it tends to lend to some speculation that his intent was to leave that behind along with the bullets as some type of message. When you think of the game of Monopoly, you win by breaking your opponent, by making money at the expense of others. And that seems to go along with the theme of the manifesto that was found. But this is simply speculation. Who knows what was in this person's mind, but I would think that he meant to leave it behind. Jesse, one has to remember that to commit a homicide, to take the life of another, is a life-altering event. It's something that most of us have never done, and God willing, will never have to do it. Right before someone does it and after they do it, all types of things go through their mind, and whatever plan they had quite often goes off the rails because of the emotions that come along with this. So it's easy to speculate that he had a plan, and once he executed this crime, that some of that went out the window.
There is a lot of talk right now, Serena, about did he have help? Was he acting alone? I mean, the authorities have said so far that he's been acting alone, but we have a question from Nancy Liebenberg. Could this be a murder for hire? Now, one of the things that I do find interesting is how he could have had access to Brian Thompson's movements. What do I mean by that? I mean, yes, it was public knowledge. I mean, part of the investors conference that he was going to be speaking, when he was going to be speaking, but the fact that he was going to be arriving so early and walking on that particular street. Now, from my perspective, I know the Hilton Hotel. There are, I believe, 3 entrances in which you can get in there. But there's one particular street, again, I think it was 54th Street, that this was happening. And it's an interesting way to know where if you were going to do this, it makes me wonder, would you have just waited outside? Because that was not the front entrance of the hotel, it was the side. So how does someone get this information about Brian Thompson's movements, unless he had some sort of inside information? But that's purely speculation because authorities have said he hasn't had any help. Do you think there's anything to suggest there's more to this, that whether it was a murder for hire? Because right now we can't find a connection between him and United Healthcare or Brian Thompson.
I think this is the very beginning of what's going to be a wild story. It doesn't smell to me like a murder for hire. First of all, we're all assuming that they caught the right person. We still don't know that yet, right? Innocent until proven guilty. But assuming if he is the person who committed this crime, I would find it hard to believe that someone hired this guy to commit the murder. First of all, he doesn't need the money. We just heard he comes from a prominent family. He's well-educated, intelligent. He comes from, a lot of caring people who have a lot of money. So I would be very surprised if he would simply commit this callous act just to make money. If he is the one who did it, it feels like he had a reason that he believed was important. It doesn't seem like he's the type to do a murder for someone else.
Well, disturbingly, you're seeing this outpouring of support. So many people will think, you did us a favor, you did the right thing, which is just insane to think about. But it does lead me to another question. And Tom, I'll throw this one to you. This is from Adon Solis. Would the image and perspective of the public be taken into account with this case, given that this case truly doesn't bother that many people so far? I mean, look, it's crazy that I'm saying this, but there is this outpouring of support for the shooting of Brian Thompson, and particularly when Luigi Mangione was identified, particularly on social media, there was, you're a hero, love your work. They called him the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And this is reflecting on him, and I wonder, is it going to reflect on the family? But this idea of, yes, he will be charged with murder and prosecuted for murder, despite if the public, thinks this is a great thing. But I'm just curious your perspective of the fact that he's being hailed as a hero by a large segment, not a large segment, but a certain segment of the population.
It's horrifying that someone would glorify this and try to use it to cast a light on what's going on with United Healthcare, the number of claims they deny, and so forth. I mean, it's an important issue in general, but it has nothing to do with a heinous murder that took place. And I think that's where the focus should be, with the family, with the fact that this is a father and an ex-husband, and certainly a dear member of the family that's now grieving. All of that being said, I do think that the Mangione family should not be feeling anyone's anger. They had nothing to do with this. The fact that one of the members of their family is being accused of this is just a tragedy. It's shocking. But as a friend of mine posted on Facebook the other day, he said, don't think of the family because of the alleged actions of a member of the family. Don't put them in that same box. They're still the same people who do a lot of good for a lot of people, and I think that's really where things should be, not on these other peripheral issues, just on getting to the truth.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We have a question, Kirk. I'm going to go to you on this. This is from Krista Helicopter. Man, I hope that's her last name. But Krista Helicopter says, will he be drug tested in jail, or do you need a warrant for that? It's an interesting question, considering we're seeing this kind of erratic behavior today from him. What do you think? Will he be drug tested in jail, or do you need a warrant for that?
This is a good question. I think that what would dictate that is whether he poses a danger to himself or the corrections officials. Something about drug testing is to keep in mind how that information is obtained. If it's obtained in a very intrusive fashion, such as the drawing of blood, breaking the skin, courts are less likely to allow law enforcement officials to do so without a warrant. In most cases, once he is in custody, unless there is some suspicion that he took some type of narcotic that is long lasting, he's in custody long enough where if he had ingested some type of narcotic, the effects would have been worn off by now. So in short, I doubt it. What's more likely is the court may order at some point some form of psychological exam.
Well, let me just press you on that. You mean to see if he's competent to stand trial, I would imagine, because in terms of insanity, that's a separate issue, because the evidence would suggest this is somebody who deliberately committed a crime, knew what they were doing, tried to escape custody, tried to escape law enforcement. I think about all the things: riding away on the bike, wearing the mask, going on the bus, taking all the reporting as true. When you say a mental health exam, where could that lead exactly?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is whether he's a suicide risk. So for safety reasons, that might be something correction officials or the court may consider. Further, he did display this ability to think coherently and plan. However, you have this other behavior, the monopoly money, the manifesto, and all these other types of things. Who knows if at some point he may plead some other type of defense. I think it's in the interest of everyone to determine his competency early on in this proceeding. Certainly, if I'm a prosecutor, I don't want to be surprised by this.
Right. By the way, we have an update right now. The CNN is reporting that New York Governor Kathy Hochul will plan to submit a warrant for Luigi Mangione's extradition from Pennsylvania. And Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office said that it will seek that warrant, again, to secure the extradition. So the way to get him back here to face those charges that I mentioned. And let me actually lay that out for you, because we have a copy of the felony arrest warrant: murder in the second degree, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, so 2 counts of that, criminal possession of a forged instrument in the second degree, and criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree. Okay, so let me ask you this, Serena. He can be charged in New York, but he hasn't been indicted by a grand jury as of yet. You need to do that to proceed with this case towards trial. Talk to us about how that would work. You first have to extradite him before you have a grand jury indictment. Talk to us about that.
Well, you don't actually need to. You could indict somebody even before they come over here, but in order to keep him incarcerated once he does come over here, they must indict him in a very short period of time.
120 hours, right? Isn't that what it
It's
is?
6 days,
6 days.
essentially. Yes, and if they don't indict him within 6 days of his incarceration in New York, he gets set free. So the clock is ticking on that. But yes, they could charge him with these charges initially. In order to proceed with the felony, though, they need a grand jury to be charged with each of these counts, and they need that grand jury to come back with a true bill on each count in order to hold him. Sometimes, because they are pressed for time, they'll only indict on the top count really quickly, and then if they need to collect additional evidence to put in front of that same grand jury, they'll indict the rest of the charges as the week goes on, or the weeks go on.
We have a question from Josepha Harrison, excuse me. What did he shout? Meaning, what did he shout when he was on his way to court? So the reporting is, he said, it's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people. It's lived experience. He might have said something before, but it was kind of cut off. And in terms of what he said in court, as Sierra Gillespie had said, we're not entirely sure, but he was shut down very quickly by his own attorney to not say anything. Now, Tom, I want to go back to you. You're a criminal defense attorney, correct? Right?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I want to ask you, this is an interesting question. Well, I lost track of it. Okay, this is a question from Jane. How is the jury going to be chosen given the fact so many people know about this awful case?
And I assume you mean the New York jury. Is that correct?
Let's go with the New York jury, yeah.
Okay. One of the things that he's going to want to consider is the massive amount of coverage of this case. And I would fully expect he'd think about some sort of change venue motion. But with it being a national story, it may be tough to get around that. I would think that the jury is going to be asked a lot of questions on voir dire about their knowledge of the case and whether anything that they've heard about this will prejudice their views and ability to be fair. The other thing is I think you're going to see questions that relate to healthcare. And those are very legitimate questions from the defense perspective. I'd want to know, have you had a claim that was denied, or have you had a positive experience with an insurance company? Do you feel that insurance companies have treated you and your family fairly? I think these are important questions because something like that, pro or con, could influence somebody's view on insurance companies, and maybe they look at this as some sort of a Batman situation. The mercenary, the vigilante comes in to kill off the bad guy, and that's of course not really the truth at all, but that might be something in the back of someone's mind.
Yeah, and I think with this outpouring of support, it's going to make it interesting. But I don't think a change of venue is necessarily going to solve an issue, particularly with health insurance that affects almost everybody in this country. So yeah, it's going to be interesting when we move towards that, but we're nowhere near that as of yet. He hasn't even been indicted as of yet. Professor Kirk, I want to go to you. We have a question from Jack Horn on YouTube. Actually, I'm sorry, Professor. I don't mean to be rude, but this is for Serena. So now, Serena, I have to go to you.
That's okay.
Serena, will he be housed in Rikers if he's extradited?
Now I know why it's for me. If he is facing charges in Manhattan on a state level, he will be incarcerated on Rikers Island. And to your question, or someone's question earlier about intoxication or drug ingestion, we are going to have to be concerned about that, because a lot of times people do get access to contraband and drugs on Rikers Island. And I think that if he's housed on Rikers Island, his defense attorney should make a motion for protective custody, which would allow him to essentially be held by himself. Not solitary confinement in the traditional sense, but the type of situation that Harvey Weinstein is facing. He's so popular and there's so many potential threats to him. His lawyer should probably apply for him to be in protective custody so that he's watched over very carefully.
Kirk, let me go back to you on this, the extradition issue. If he is fighting it, if his attorneys are fighting it, and the defense said earlier in that courtroom there are charges in New York, they asked why the court would deny his bail in Pennsylvania. They want to focus on the Pennsylvania Pennsylvania charges. What are arguments to fight extradition back to New York?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be quite honest, because my thought is this will play itself out, and there is simply no way that he will not be extradited to New York. Maybe it'll take 30 to 45 days. What's the argument that you want, or that one would make? Hey, I committed these crimes in Pennsylvania, or I'm accused of these crimes in Pennsylvania, and this is where this matter should be adjudicated first. What's the argument he can make? I don't want to go back to New York because I'm facing a murder charge. So it's very interesting. I also would not be surprised if his attorneys at some point kind of talk him into changing his mind, right? Let's get this show on the road. Let's, start mounting your defense. This is going to happen anyway. Let's not waste our time and resources in Pennsylvania.
There was a question about that. It's related. I'll read it out right now. This is from Ali Tovor. Does he have an attorney? Why was he denied bail? So, yes, he has an attorney in Pennsylvania, Thomas Dickey from Altoona. But why was he denied bail? Is it because, look, he's facing in Pennsylvania forgery and weapons charges? In any other scenario, Tom, would he have been denied bail, or is it because of what happened in New York?
I think he'd be denied bail in just about any circumstance. Anytime there's an allegation of murder, that's almost just prima
But let me
facie.
rephrase it. He's not charged with murder in Pennsylvania, right? He's only
Right,
charged with the weapons charge. So I'm just saying, is it because of the murder charge in New York that he was denied bail? And does a separate court,
Absolutely.
a separate jurisdiction look at that?
Absolutely. They consider anything pending. They consider the seriousness of it. They consider what a flight risk he might be. And I don't think there's any chance he'd get released in any jurisdiction with those type of charges.
We got a question from Alina Moore. I answered this before, but I'm going to allow Serena to jump in. Why is he being charged with murder in the second degree in New York and not murder in the first degree?
An excellent question. Murder in the first degree is very rare. You usually need to be committing a separate felony in order to what's called bump up a murder in the second degree to a murder in the first degree. So for example, if you're committing a burglary and you murder somebody, those two combinations of crimes will bump the charge all the way up to that very, very top count of murder in the first degree. Murder in the second degree really is the top charge that could be charged in this particular set of circumstances. It requires that he intended to kill this person and that he did in fact kill the person. It doesn't really get more serious than that unless you add a second felony to it.
Isn't it also first degree is very specific categories? If you kill a
Yes.
police officer, you kill a firefighter, if you kill somebody in prison, it's very specific, whereas second degree is just the intentional killing of another human being.
That's exactly right. There's a few different categories of bump ups, and you've named a few of them as well.
Yeah. Okay. I
Jesse,
want to
if
go.
I could-
Yes. Please.
I'm
please,
sorry, I
please
just
go
want to
ahead.
chime in a second. Someone asked about whether this was a hit, so to speak. And I just wanted to mention that's the big ticket item also in New York for murder in the first degree, murder for hire, where the hit man, so to speak, and also the person who hires the hit person would be liable for murder in the first degree. So had this been a murder for hire case, he'd be charged with murder in the first degree.
That's a really, really good point. I'm glad you mentioned it. But again, nothing to suggest that this was murder for hire. The authorities have said that he was acting alone. Professor, I'll just stick with you. Kirk, let me ask you this. So a question from Marie Pili Bereda. The topic of how terrible chronic physical pain is, because apparently he had this back surgery, what does it do to your mental health? Do you think that would be a strong point for the defense?
It may be a point the defense would raise with regards to seeking some form of mitigation of charges or sympathy. However, there are so many people that live with so many other types of issues. The bottom line here is whether someone deserves to die. So as a prosecutor, my argument is going to be, I'm really sorry to hear that you're back, you were dealing with this chronic pain. I'm sorry to hear that you had claims denied. I'm sorry to hear anything. However, these were not, did not mean that the victim deserved to die, deserved to be shot in the street. So, and I would also be careful about making that argument, certainly in front of a jury, because juries react very poorly when an argument doesn't pass the laugh test, so to speak.